My game of the day from round 5 of the Tromsø Olympiad is the encounter between Vladimir Kramnik and Veselin Topalov. Since their World Championship match in 2006, where there were all kinds of allegations of cheating, these two players have a really bitter feud. Recently, when they've played, well, most of the games have been decisive. They always really go for each other. It's as though their equilibrium is a little bit out of balance somehow. Kramnik with the white pieces. This game was really no exception. It was a very standard opening. A kind of closed Catalan. A little bit unusual to play with the queen to d3. But you know, fairly normal position, and now c6 for black here would be standard, and then b6. But instead Topalov played a very provocative move. Knight b6 tempts this pawn forward. Although black loses time, what he wants to do is break white's pawn chain, or use these breaks, either e5 or b6. So now the pawn structure is fixed, it's easier for black to determine his strategy. White has to try and hold the position, so you can see white has this spearhead of pawns on the queen side. So that's Kramnik's task, to keep the position clamped. b6, so Topalov makes efforts to activate this bishop. Good idea. Bishop f4, very important diagonal. Counterplay comes on the queen side, and now the bishop comes to a6. Now you can see this is a slight problem for white, because this bishop very often on this side of the board would be able to neutralise this idea, but this bishop is on a pretty good diagonal. Topalov attacks the bishop, this important bishop, pushes it off the diagonal, and the knight comes back. Now Topalov, in doing this, is basically saying that he would be content with a draw. But Kramnik, well, I think with the white, if he just drew so quickly with the white pieces, that would kind of be backing down. He's not prepared to do this. So he plays for a win. And rook e1 is anyway a useful move. Sometimes you might want to play e4. I should say that I'm in the middle of a hall here where the ChessBase studio is. There are stands all around me. There's the FIDE First stand, Kirzan's campaign stand here, Garry Kasparov's campaign stand across the other side of the hall, and ChessBase is somewhere in the middle with lots of other things going on. So there's a constant cast of people coming and going here. That's what the background noise is. So hopefully it gives a little bit of atmosphere. And sometimes we even have people wandering in front of the camera, but hey, that's the way it goes. Kramnik comes back with his bishop, and once again they have this little dance with the knight and bishops. Topalov happy with the draw, and once again Kramnik showing that he wants to play for a win. Instead of bishop f4, he played h3. Well, this is a useful move, because sometimes you want to advance with g4, and then play the bishop to f4, which would secure this important diagonal. So h3 is, of course, a logical move. Knight d2, hitting the bishop, which it goes back, and now f4. So you can see that black's break with e5 has been prevented. So Kramnik is attempting this huge clamp on the position, and here black could sit and wait. He's looking for counterplay on the b file, but actually, these squares are well protected. There's no doubt that Kramnik is better here and has a pleasant space advantage. Whether you can do anything with that is another matter. Topalov could play like this, but it doesn't really fit his style. He's a very active player. It's not him to have a passive position. And instead of this, he broke out with knight takes c5. A little combination. Now Kramnik had seen this. pawn hits two pieces, so black wins the piece back. And Topi is trying to get some activity, so the bishop comes out and hits the rook. Now, if the rook were to move away, then rook b8, and suddenly you can see black has superb counterplay here. But Kramnik had foreseen this and played pawn to e4, giving up the exchange. So the rook has gone, but pawn takes d5. The bishop is en prise. Topalov protected this with the queen. Now, at first glance you might think, well, you should take the pawn here. No problem. But actually, it's difficult to force these pawns through. You know, black can protect against this. I think white has compensation, but black is still in the game. Instead, Kramnik played d6. It's an excellent move, because there's no counterplay on the d file now. That's one thing. No open file for the rooks. And if white were able to snag this pawn on c6, then he will have two pass pawns. Very good move. Maybe Topalov underestimated this, because actually from here on, the game runs very smoothly. You know, this bishop is very awkwardly placed actually. So this pawn does drop. And knight b1. Now this looks like a very odd move to put the knight back on b1, but actually it works out extremely well, because that knight to some degree dominates the bishop. You can see that bishop doesn't really have any good square here. So it sort of cuts the bishop out of play. Now, of course, white's main strategy is to force those centre pawns through. Topalov desperately seeking counterplay with e5. And now knight c3. Okay, the knight seizes its chance now that the pawn has moved from e6. If this is exchanged off, then, well, for example, I mean, this is completely winning for white. You can see that clearly. So the queen comes across, and knight d5. Well, this is simply fantastic for white. All the pieces are active. These two pawns look great, and really you can see that, well, black has no grip on the centre whatsoever. Knight d5 is a great move. I mean, this is so, you know, concentrating absolutely on the main strategy, the main task, which is to force the pawns through. It's basically not worried about giving up this pawn on h3, because his king is surrounded, who is defended by these bishops. It's actually terribly safe, and black can't follow up with any other pieces. d7, and now the pawns advance. There's no decent defence, and Kramnik finishes with a flourish. As he said after the game, there are probably many ways to win this, but I think the way he chose was efficient and straightforward and no complication. So he gives up his queen, but obviously rook takes. There is no defence to d8 queen. Topalov thrashed around with a couple of checks, moved the queen in, but actually there's very little to calculate. Kramnik makes a queen, and after this the king is completely safe. White has a rook up, and knight here and queen here. Well, it's basically a mating attack. There's no defence at all. Well, that was a classic Kramnik game. You so often see him powering through the centre of the board. You know, I can think of many other Catalan games where this has happened actually. But yeah, Topi are not on very good form in that game. Thanks for watching.